All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Inside Area 51. It's been a while since we've done one of these. Honestly, it's been a while just because there hasn't been anything really to talk about as far as Canucks stuff go that isn't just the same old with the regime that was in place. But we saw sweeping changes happen late last night as Canucks were relieving Jim Benning, John Weisbrod, Nolan Baumgartner have assumed all of the duties, replacing them with a conglomerate of interim GM as a group. So Stan Smyl being kind of the leader of that. And then, of course, Bruce Boudreau, who we'll see behind the bench as early as tonight. So a lot to take in. We got to see Francesco and the ownership group represented at a media availability today, which was the first in a long time, as well as Stan Smyl and then Bruce Boudreau, of course. So any takeaways from the media availability? I caught everything but Bruce's so far.
There was so much, and I think in part there was so much because we've been conditioned for the last 7.5 years to expect absolutely nothing, rambling answers, incoherent responses, and that will be the last I say about it. But what a stark contrast that has been to today, just top to bottom. Francesco, literally the first time that he's answered from the general media in 7.5 years. And if anyone doesn't know or doesn't understand the significance between that and what we've had on a show in 650, as great a job as they've done, that is the difference. Is there were so many questions. The timing of the questions was incredible. And he really had to face the music in a way that he really hasn't in, close to a decade. And I think everyone knows where I stand with Francesco Aquilini. By no means did he win me over or anything like that today. But realistically, based on what my expectations of, him are and what today was, he did exceed those expectations. He took more accountability than I think he ever has in the past. Certainly, during these last 7.5 years, he admitted on 2 occasions that he'd been too patient. Of course, he was going to deny his direct involvement when asked directly about it. But then, of course, the media were able to ask some carefully worded questions that then made it very clear that he was, fairly heavily involved. Shout out to Thomas Drance for perfectly asking that question afterwards,
Just
about
right
Boudreau,
after,
because,
so,
how can you deny direct involvement and then, clearly be the guy responsible for this Boudreau hire? So, just caught him just, in a web of lies.
that's where Stan Smyl came to the rescue. It was like, it was the group. The group did it. I was like, yeah, it was a little too late, but yeah, nice try.
Well, and of course that was very powerful, and I think a part of it too, that if that was the first one, I'm sure earned some clout with Francesco, which I think is important for us Canucks fans, by bailing him out with that answer. And then, as you could see, the even though most of the questions were directed at Francesco, more and more Stan Smyl started answering some of them and giving some pretty revealing answers. Like I didn't actually, write down, but player at coach at or player at owner. Like there were he directly named some of the finger pointing that was going around, because it wasn't like he just blanket, like he was methodically going around at some of the finger pointing. You could see
Coach
the
owner,
process. It wasn't
coach the GM to the players,
and
players
said that,
to the coach,
and that had to stop. And then of course, and Francesco was the impetus of this. That last game, the chanting, the jersey on the ice, asked directly, no. Smyl, Cheech, who I think, of course, certainly was not setting up for this answer, but accidentally gave confirmation of Cheech blew it with that question, to be completely honest. God bless him. But he then answered that was the moment, that he then went into Francesco's office and said, enough is enough. We can't keep this up. And clearly that is when we got that change. Literally later that night is the rumored report that Benning got word that he was out of a job, and the next day he was packing up. So, again, based on what we are used to getting out of some of these press conferences, that was
it was huge,
explosive, incredible, revealing, honest. They talked about the lack of a plan, which clearly they have not in the last little while. So the things that we saw that I think realistically you can be encouraged by. I obviously was encouraged by. I think everyone knows where I've stood. I this turnover, a new leaf, and talk about I don't know if again anyone else has further comments on that. I know I've kind of dominated that conversation.
Adam Hassan, any takeaways from the media before we move?
Malcolm touched on a lot of it, but the main thing to me was the comment he had about the communication, which I think Malcolm touched on, was just huge. Talking about there needs to be more communication with the owners or management to the fans, but within the organization as well. So that gives me some hope that Francesco at least has understood what works and what doesn't work. Like I'm with Malcolm. I wouldn't say I'm like, oh yes, I'm blown away, I'm team Francesco now, but I would say based on what I'm expecting, pleasantly surprised with what I heard, and like it's good to. It just feels like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. I'm excited to talk about the Canucks again. Like I don't know about you guys, but the past few weeks it's been a chore to watch these games, to go on my podcast and talk about the games. So it's just really refreshing to have something new to talk about and know, at least have some sort of hope that there will be some new direction with the franchise. So looking forward to watching the game tonight for first time in a while. And that's all I got.
Honestly,
we've just not been doing them.
Yeah. Honestly, since training camp, this is the most excited I've been to watch a game. And it's not like because I think they're going to just instantaneously find this inspiration in a bottle from Bruce Boudreau. He's going to pull out Michael Jordan's secret stuff and everybody's going to be amped now, right? But I just to see how he utilizes some of the guys. I want to see what Pettersson's ice time looks like. I want to see what this penalty kill looks like, kind of how he adjusts throughout the game. I think that'll be a really telling sign about where things are going.
For sure.
Before I move to you, Adam, I did want to comment on the communication thing, because I thought that was the only time that I face palmed at one point, was the irony in well, I didn't say anything about communication. Did you say anything about? I just had a good laugh about that.
That was the one. Like, I really wish I could erase that from my memory too, and I just had, I guess, until then, because that was absolutely the cringe
like,
moment.
no,
like, oh,
everything was going so good,
so close on that, and unfortunately, I think the question just wasn't well worded, and it kind of allowed him to get off the hook a little bit. So I'm gonna give him that one.
He gets one free pass from Malcolm.
You got one, and that's definitely the one, though. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a good chuckle about it. Not that I thought it was like anything super indicative of major issues like we've had before in the past with these availabilities, but it was definitely worthy of a chuckle for me.
We have the other answer. We can play that back for him as his quote.
Exactly. This is what he said about communication. That one, not this like miscommunication on the stand about communication.
And you move on.
Yeah. Adam, how about you? Anything that you took away before we move on to looking ahead?
Well, my one of my big takeaways from this is that this Smyl situation, I feel like Francesco has learned from the Trevor Linden situation in a way, like that people are going to gravitate towards Stan Smyl. A lot of people were very critical of Aquilini and still are for how he treated Trevor Linden, who is one of the faces of this franchise. But now you got Daniel, Henrik, and Stan Smyl in that office. Like, you can't go 0 for 4 on this with fans turning your back on it. So I actually think that as much as they believe that Stan Smyl deserves to be the president going forward. I believe, he's put in his time. He said he's been a Canuck for 40 years at this point. He's got his number in the rafters. I know he's stepped away over the last little bit. That was what the report was. He didn't really want to, I guess, deal with the whole Benning situation, which, I mean, when we look at it, there were 4 people left in the front office probably by the time he left. So, he started isolating himself.
That was actually another interesting point, and I think maybe a revealing answer from Francesco when he talked about, it's the GM's call ultimately how big or how small that room is. And that, I think, maybe is the closest we may ever get to Francesco throwing Benning under the bus a little bit there. Because, he did say, hey, that wasn't my call to have a small office. And, certainly, that's consistent with some of the other reports that, Benning and Weisbrod like to have that, tight circle. It's a
question of how much, leash, was afforded to Jim and John. And, ultimately that was Aquilini's decision. There's no hiding from that. Like, whether you want to say, sure, it wasn't my decision to necessarily have a small front office because I was letting, Jim Benning make that call, but it is your fault that, you let them have 8 years and clearly the on-ice product wasn't working. You should have stepped in at some point and said, hey, this isn't working. We need to try something new.
I thought that was pretty telling too, just the multiple times where he said I was too patient, I was too optimistic. And like, I do and I don't want him to learn from that a little bit. Like, I think back to like the Gillis era, I would have loved for him to be a little bit more patient, right? Whereas with Benning, he was so much more patient and it was a downfall. So I do and I don't want him to be like, yeah, I was way too patient. Now I need to be trigger happy.
Yeah. But I mean, Aqua sort of works in that way of polar opposites, right? Like, every hire has been, we got this now, we're going that way. Like, we had the experienced coach in the front office, we went inexperienced. We're back with the, Bruce Boudreau experienced coach. Like, it always seems like it's always a huge swing in the opposite direction. So, I mean, hopefully, he's learned from which of
course I joked about with you, Sean, on our last episode, right? We said, if he does have this tendency to go the other way, and as you point out, and as everyone who has caught the green presser, you couldn't really get a more stark contrast in personality than Travis Green and Bruce Boudreau. What a bubbly guy, candid answers, as you brought up, Adam, reference analytics, I like that he addressed each part of the question as well. He didn't just kind of cherry pick the part of the answer that he wanted to do. And that's, Travis Green was a little bit more of a politician. And I think to his credit, he
a little bit more
to
prickly too.
Yeah.
but certainly more prickly and certainly more combative to some of the answers. Like, PK is 64%. It's like, yeah, it's not very good, is it? Right? Like, you never would have got that kind of response out of Travis Green. And obviously easier to do when it's not your PK.
Also, it had been 5 years of Green just sort of been trotting out in front of the media to taking bullets about what a trash team, how trash the team has been on the ice when not all of it is necessarily his fault. Easy for Boudreau to come in and crack jokes about the penalty kills, first availability, hasn't coached a game yet, right? And things, it's easy to make light. So, give him a few games, few weeks. We'll see how nice he is to the media.
One thing that I really liked about what Bruce Boudreau said was that a player came up to him and asked to be on the penalty kill. And he was like, okay, but if you fail, don't ask me again. It's like, I love that. Like, he's like, you know what? You want to take that out of responsibility? Go ahead. If you blow it, it's on you. Don't ask me again, but I'm going to give you that opportunity. Well, obviously, we'll see. If we see Podkolzin or Hoglander on the penalty kill, then obviously we can put 2 and 2 together. But if it stays the same, like, we'll see what he does with that.
I push for this. I want to see Petey on the PK. But I think, as you said, like, who is it that guy going to be out of the blue on the PK, this game or, in the next couple games? And we'll get our answer to who that person was and answer that question. But I love to see that too. And that's, I hate to keep going back, as I already said I wasn't going to do, but that's the beauty of moving on to a new management and a new coach, is everyone gets this fresh sheet. The past is the past. It doesn't matter. You're not going to make decisions on anything based on what's happened. You're going to, move on from this point forward. And that's why, change has been so necessary, and it's so just elating. Like today, I was just, I had just a happy, just walking, it was such, it's going to be such a different mood, I think, in the building. And even if the results, similar short term, it doesn't really matter, because the page has been turned and we can finally move on. Like, you have that, I think we've been conditioned to have that like instinctive, okay, but like what's going to go bad now? Like,
I was just waiting for our first round pick to get traded again. And I was like, frig, like, they're going to trade our first round pick again. And we're going to have 3 years, no picks. It would have been a high one again. And we're going to end up with like Milan Lucic because we did lack team toughness. That was
our first round pick. Could you imagine?
No.
So before we, flip over the page, there is one thing that I want to mention from the press conference that I was a little disappointed by, and that is that nobody asked Francesco to his face what John Weisbrod does for this organization. Like, it's such a perfect.
I think I could write it in a Hallmark card. What his job responsibilities.
It's 8 years, 7.5 years, and we still nobody knows.
Idea.
Like,
I'm honestly ready to move. I'm ready to move on from it. Honestly, I'm done. I have
I never want to hear John Weisbrod's name ever
going
again.
on, but you don't really have any proof of it.
And we as much as we like to joke about that, we do know what he did. He was Jim's right-hand man. He was the one guy Jim went to bounce any ideas off that he did have. And he oversaw, at least in the later years, the scouting department, right? So, like, what I think the real question we had was, what does John Weisbrod do that actually adds value to this franchise? And the question was nothing.
Same as Jim Benning.
As the son said, let's turn the page. Like,
I'm done dissecting the Benning era.
I'm so done and ready to move on from all that shit. Let's just.
I'm with Malcolm on that.
With this next page, so there is a lot to do, right? Like, I know we want to call it a new era. It isn't. I don't feel quite ready to call it a new era. It's just the end of a previous one, right? We haven't got a president of hockey ops. We don't have a GM that are long term. We've got a new coach. So, I mean, at least that part is in place. It's weird that part happened first, but here we are. It feels like the dark clouds are gone and we've just been replaced with like a morning. We don't really know what's to come, but we just hope that it's going to be better and brighter than previous. So moving forward, where do you start? Where do you go?
Well, first off, Bruce Boudreau seems like the greatest human being on the planet.
I love
he has a commercial where he makes bird sounds to advertise insurance. He was in Slapshot, and they used his like apartment in that movie. There's the story about how the fire alarm went off one time.
I was gonna say
building, and he was just like, "I'll take my chance here." And then apparently today, getting up from his press conference, he dropped an F-bomb during the JT Miller's gonna love this guy. Like, it's just it just makes it feel like he's like a person that people are gonna like. He just has that like kind of like I don't want to say that he has like that Santa feel, but like he's like like people just get happy when they see him.
Yeah, like everyone seems super endearing.
He's one of the boys, so he's going to come in. He's going to be a real players coach. He's not going to be this kind of hard ass that Travis was, right? I think Travis is going to go on somewhere else and be very successful, somewhere where that type of coach is needed. Actually. Okay, go ahead.
Travis Green is going to end up in Philadelphia.
That's my prediction.
I think that's a great fit. AV's kind of a player's coach. They need somebody a little bit stricter. Travis is probably that kind of guy. Poor Zach McEwen, though.
When we get the draft pick back for Philadelphia signing Travis Green, we won't have to worry about him being placed on waivers and losing him.
Exactly. That rule doesn't exist anymore, though, right?
Oh, I have no idea. I just remember that.
We no longer get a conditional pick if someone if we
which is unfortunate. Or
we'd be paying Minnesota one, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's disappointing. I thought that I had my information up to date. I guess I don't.
No.
Yeah. Oh shoot, I had a point there. Oh, that was one thing out of the press conference that I was slightly disappointed to hear, and it was Stan Smyl talk about how great of a development program they have because they lost players on waivers. These teams want them, and I'm like, yeah, but what about that? What does that say about the asset management that took place with this group? The development is fine, sure, but you got to keep them.
But then he also goes on to say that that's an area that they plan on investing heavily in, right?
Which is great.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, again, like, short of saying, the guys who here are idiots, that's implicitly implied by the firing press conference, right? Like that first part said, and then every part of the answer that they give is like, the second half after that's, clearly been said, right? And then they go on to say, they're going to invest heavily in that area, which is what you want to hear, right?
Absolutely. And you want to hear heavy investments in off the ice stuff as well, because the Aquilinis have been great about investing on the ice, but off the ice, I mean, we've just seen it skinny out over time, and it was blamed on Benning. I'm okay totally believing that, and as long as it changes and it's proven wrong, right?
Exactly. Just words at this point. But it will be very interesting to see president, GM, whoever that is, what they do with their staff. And if all of a sudden we do see, a
big staff,
6-person staff, you know what? For the sake of moving on, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, because that is, again, consistent of what we heard is that, Jim and John liked having that short, small table. So,
well,
again,
we already know. We already know we have a 5-person staff, so that's already more, because we got the Sedin here, Ryan Johnson, and Stan Smyl. Like, we already know that.
It's already doubled.
Yeah,
it's doubled the number of GMs immediately. What? Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Josh.
So whoever comes in better have a plan this time. None of this day-to-day stuff anymore. Like, they better have a kind of plan going forward.
I think that was one thing that jumped out to me too in the press conference Aquilini's comments about he said it as a joke, but I kind of read a little bit more into it, and it was if I had a president of hockey ops, I wouldn't be the one sitting here doing this. I wouldn't have to do this. And it's like, you're right, because a president of hockey ops put a can Benning like 3 years ago. But I thought it was great because I think it shows that he has everything on the table. He kept saying that over and over again. But I think he's really, really strongly considering and putting a lot of value in having a president and a general manager. He talked about it several times as being two people that need to collaboratively work together and cohesively work instead of being one person. So I really enjoyed that, that he multiple times referenced two people holding those positions.
If he knows that he needs a president, why has it taken 3 years to has he just come to that realization now?
That's learning lessons. Life's a learning lesson. Quote Francesco Aquilini.
But I think that's again the point that he's been pushed to. He's been forced to learn this lesson. It wasn't he didn't enroll in this class. It was a school in hard knocks and life teaching it to him that the fans will not stand for this kind of horseshit, right? So again, words are words, and all that will matter ultimately is the actions taken, meaning the hires that they make, and then what we are actually tangibly able to see that they do, right? Yeah. But for the most part, we got as much as we reasonably could expect out of this conference, and the order of operations of this is weird, and like God knows, my heart absolutely sunk when I first saw that Friedman text that Bruce Boudreau's hired, the Jesse Pickman, he can't keep getting away with this was the first kind of thought that flashed through my head. But now that you kind of see the mechanics and what was going on, clearly that was the tipping point in the game. They didn't want to, they wanted to have the whole thing rolled out, didn't have the time. They were able to negotiate a year and a half deal for a coach, which I think is fair to say is quite unusual to have something that short term. So clearly has the out for a new GM if they want to take it. Yeah, go ahead.
So apparently, according to Emily Kaplan, that just came out, is that the deal is this year and then next year is a team option. So it could only be a 60-game contract in the end.
Which is wild. So there's your out right there. If the new general manager president do not want to continue with Bruce.
Yeah. Any chance there is a dollar figure attached to that? Because
they said it's $2 million this year and $2.5 million next.
Yeah. Which pretty cheap considering.
No, but I think actually that's more than Green was getting, though. No.
Green was getting
more, I believe.
2, I thought. But
with the compression of these coaches' salaries in this COVID era, it's not. I guess it's not a gross overpayment or anything like that. But impressive that they were able to get that kind of deal done with a big name coach like that. And
that's where
with
my
that added context,
surprise comes.
In Philadelphia, Vigneault was making $5 million a year.
Absolutely, but he signed at the top of the market.
Yeah.
Prior to
you're getting a coach that's almost the same experience as Vigneault, maybe not the playoff experience, for $3 million cheaper, basically.
Yeah, and for essentially 60 games with a 1-year additional option. So, for me, I like it. I like Bruce a lot. He's kind of the one that I was campaigning for as a coach. You look back at just his body of work and he might not have the playoffs there, but honestly, we're not going to the playoffs this year anyways. So, I mean, what I want to see is him unleash the horses here. Let's see what Pedersen has, Besser has, Podkolzin. Let's see what these guys have where they're the ones, the go-tos. There's no insulation anymore. And this season, it's been really tough, right? Like, I don't think we have to really go into that, but it's been really tough. And I don't think we've seen anywhere close to even half of what these players are capable of doing. It's just that they're not being utilized properly. And Bruce is very good at finding the best spots for them. First year with Bruce, Ovechkin put up 65 goals. Like, he's that type of coach that gets the most out of his star players.
It's that new lease on life, right? The players feel refreshed and ready to go. They're not bogged down by everything that's happened in the past. That's the difference between the incumbent GM who built this team and coach who helped influence this team, and a new acting interim GM who clearly has a different vision with the prospect of a new GM coming in and a brand new, completely different coach. Everyone in that locker room, as Smyl said himself too, everyone was waiting for something to happen. Right? Yeah. So clearly you're going to see a different mentality out of the players. That affects your psyche when you clearly. How could you have confidence as a player who know this game way better than anyone on this panel, anyone watching, that these guys actually know what they're doing? I have no doubt that all the players internally were going, what the hell is going on with this? So to have that, and you'll see a different effort because it's, hey, I understand the position that you guys have been put into to, fix this thing around. We know we're a flawed team. We're going to give it our best effort because, you either want to make it work here or get moved somewhere else and, make it work there. So, again, it's just a refreshing feeling. You can relax and breathe, and there isn't that impending, well, God knows they're going to fuck this up somehow.
Well, yeah. Do we want to go into a little bit about Bruce Boudreau and kind of a history of being able to turn around these teams?
Yeah, very quickly you can. Yeah.
Yeah, because
we'll only go for a couple more minutes here.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to Bruce Boudreau, it brings a fresh air, and he's brought a fresh air to multiple teams. This is a guy who has a career win percentage of .635. He's about to he'll coach his 1,000th career game in about a month with career-wise. So with the Canucks, unless something, I don't know, I don't see something drastically happening.
See that impending doom feeling, right? That's exactly
you can shake that. He'll be around. He'll be around.
But,
I promise.
This is a guy who's about to crack the top 20 all-time wins in regulation. He has, what is it, 8? He's finished first in the division 8 different times, including the first year that he took over for Washington in 2007, 2008. This is a guy who can turn franchises around. Now, we have to be careful. This isn't the St. Louis Blues of a couple of years ago.
No.
I think that we can all agree that they have to play over 700 hockey the rest of the season, which is, yeah, we'll just, that if they do that,
playoffs this year.
Yeah. If they somehow make the playoffs this year, I think all of us will be sitting here with our
I'll eat my hat if they make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, but it's about building for the future. If you can get, I know that a lot of fans are going to say, well, we want Shane Wright or Matthew Savoy, just tank the season. But if you can kind of build that winning culture where, you make a little bit of a late run. I think in the past we've wanted the team to we know that they're out, just drop it and kind of bottom out and see the best pick. But this year is a little bit different where I feel you want to see where Bruce Boudreau can take this team and build for the future. So, if you give up a couple draft spots in this draft, which arguably isn't as strong as the draft next year or previous one, this is kind of a little bit of a lull draft. There are very good players, but it is one of those drafts where you're you know what, if I get 8th or if I get 11th, it's not I'm gonna get a similar player in both of those spots. So this is really an opportunity for us to see what Bruce Boudreau can do, and I feel the fans are kind of rejuvenated, as we've been talking about. Fans are rejuvenized by this, and they're going to want to see wins rather than tank for Shane Wright. I don't think that we're going to catch up to Arizona at this point. But hey,
not anymore. It was looking pretty close there for a sec. Yeah. But
didn't Philadelphia pull off the 2nd overall pick, and they finished only a couple points out of the playoffs a couple years ago?
Yep.
So I know that it's not going to happen because the Canucks just don't have any luck going towards them. But you know, it's
we'll
a weird
shake
feeling,
that off
like,
eventually if things go right. Yeah.
it is a weird feeling. Like, you feel like this team can get a little bit of momentum for next year, and you kind of are like, okay, if they give up, 3 or 4 spots in the draft, maybe that's not the worst thing this season. In the past, yes, but this season, maybe not.
Well, if it helps you answer some questions going forward or helps you potentially move a player or two at the deadline, then that is where the value comes in and playing really well from here on out, right? We're not going to be busting the doors down to the playoffs, but I also don't think we should be in this tanking, first overall tank for Shane Wright race, like you mentioned. So somewhere in between where we're able to get value, find value, and know what the value of what we have already is. I think this has got to be a really honest, in-depth, exploratory period for the Canucks going ahead. And that's kind of my expectations for the rest of the season. Like, it's not that we're going to just be blown away by, Pettersson is now Ovechkin or, anything too crazy here. We just want to know what we have, what to go off of going forward. And so I thought today was a great step forward for that. It was nice to hear from Francesco. Honestly, he's well-spoken. I wish we heard from him a little bit more often. But if we get a president of hockey ops, hopefully we don't have to hear from him too often, as he alluded to. So thanks for joining me on this live. Look forward to the game tonight with Bruce Boudreau making his debut. And then obviously the return of Alex Edler as well from LA. So I'm sure there will be a lot of love thrown Eagles way tonight as well. I just wanted to give a shout out to our partners here, Hapson. I'm wearing one of their hats here. Really snazzy hockey athleisure wear. I've got their pants on as well. So representing
that type of show.
Yeah. I think
it's not coming off. It's not coming off. No. I went pants because they're so comfortable. So you can go to hapson.ca. If you go en.hapson.ca, you get the English site. It is based out of Quebec, but you can get 25% off store-wide by using promo code AREA51. So go check it out. But thanks for following and watching along with us here. And we'll see what happens tonight. Thanks, boys.
See ya.